Hi, I'm New York Times Metro reporter Jeff May sitting in for Sam Roberts. On this program, we feature leading newsmakers and the New York Times journalists who cover them. This week, we welcome author and Times opinion contributor James Pogue to discuss Silicon Valley and the MAGA movement's marriage of inconvenience. But first, we're joined by New York Times Metropolitics reporter and colleague Nicholas Fandos. We've both been covering the political drama surrounding Mayor Eric Adams. On Monday, facing federal corruption charges and a potential superseding indictment, Adams canceled his scheduled Martin Luther King Jr. Day appearances in New York to attend Trump's swearing-in ceremony in Washington, D.C. Also this week, in an interview with Tucker Carlson that aired Tuesday, the mayor declared that the Democratic Party left me when he was asked about Democrats accusing him of leaving the party. The mayor's recent alignment with Trump comes amid revelations from federal prosecutors who say they have uncovered additional criminal conduct, raising new questions about his political future and his relationship with the incoming administration. Thanks, Nick, for joining us.
Good to be here, Jeff.
Nick, it wasn't long ago that Mayor Adams referred to himself as the Biden of Brooklyn. That's changed a bit, and he's been making some strong overtures towards President Trump. What is this dramatic shift about?
Man, yeah, that feels like a long time ago. I think a couple of things come to mind for me. One, it's worth remembering, and in fairness, saying that Eric Adams, as a political figure, has always been a little bit of an ideological chameleon. He was, for a time, actually a Republican in the past, and has always been something of a centrist. So the idea that he would be comfortable with Republicans and maybe see that the wind is blowing a little bit in their direction and try to move towards them. That's not terribly surprising on one level, but the degree to which he is doing it, like how quickly and how far he's going on Tucker Carlson, going to meet with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, I think speaks to this other topic which is on everyone's mind, which is it feels like he is trying to get in the good graces of the new president to try and secure a pardon for himself, to get an answer to his legal problems and maybe his political problems too. We'll probably talk more about that. But I think those two elements combine to explain what's going on right now.
Yeah, the mayor is facing a 5-count federal corruption indictment. He's made remarks sort of blaming the Biden administration and his criticism of their immigration policies. I'm wondering, is there a direct link between his indictment and his sort of evolving relationship with Democrats?
Yeah, well, the mayor would say that all of this is about doing what's best for New York City. New York City gets a lot of support from the federal government. President Trump is from New York City and has a real interest in it and certain policies and initiatives that are here. But at the same time, I think the mayor's own party doesn't fully buy that explanation. And the closer he gets to Trump, the more upset his traditional allies seem to be within the Democratic Party of all stripes. But especially, I think there is a segment of Black leadership in the city, clergy, political leadership, et cetera, that has been inclined to stand with him despite the legal case against him, that is now getting a little uncomfortable with the extent to which he seems to be kind of comfortably slapping backs with the MAGA crowd.
Mayor Adams has said, he would seek justice from these charges, which he believes are unfair, and he has strongly denied through all venues, including potentially a pardon. I'm wondering how that might affect his role as a Democratic leader in the city. You mentioned his Black voter base. Would they be turned off if he accepted a pardon from President Trump?
A little journalistic humility here. I'll say that we have not been in this situation before as a city, so it's a little hard to say. But I think there's definitely the possibility that accepting a pardon, a friendly pardon, which he's seems to have actively sought from a president who is so disliked by a lot of the Democratic base, white, Black, Latino, et cetera, that could backfire on him basically and turn off a lot of those voters who are the reliable people who turn out in Democratic primaries. So maybe it solves his legal problem, but it punishes him politically. On the other hand, I think there's a school of thought that maybe he could get the pardon and turn around and make a compelling case that, okay, now that this legal threat is out from over or I'm out from under it, we can say that these charges were never fair, that they were targeting black man basically for sitting in first class. Now, that's obviously a reduction of everything that's in the case. It's an argument he could make, and then maybe in doing so he could placate, some of those concerns about the pardon itself and refocus attention on he was treated unfairly, and then try and push out his broader message, which is, my policies are the right ones for the city right now.
Just staying on the black voter base for a moment, you and I did an article earlier about Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is rumored to be positioning himself to enter the primary in June. We talked a little bit in that article about the black voter base and why Andrew Cuomo might have problems with that base when it comes to dealing with Mayor Adams. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the dynamic there between former Governor Cuomo and Mayor Adams when it comes to getting that important black voter base in New York City.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that could be said about it. I mean, Andrew Cuomo has been in New York politics a long time, and I think his relationship with black leaders in the city and black voters has evolved a lot. In the past, he's really screwed up that relationship and paid a price for it. But more recently, he's had very strong support in the black community. And as a result, he and Mayor Adams, in a lot of ways, have the same kind of electoral coalition, and that puts them on a collision course with each other. I think they both appeal to outer borough working class voters of all stripes, and have had especially strong support in the black community, particularly the kind of middle class black community in Queens and parts of Brooklyn. And so the mayor is trying to hold on to those supporters, as we've been talking about. He needs them to win re-election. But the former governor, if he wants to win, needs them as well. And he's got to try to peel them away from Adams without spawning a kind of backlash where, the mayor can credibly make the case that he is coming in and pushing aside the city's second black mayor in favor of himself and his own ambition, and where Adams is able to kind of successfully activate some of the sense of there being a double standard or an unfairness around the charges against him and the way he's been treated.
Mayor Adams got a call in the middle of the night inviting him to President Trump's inauguration, and he promptly got on the road, drove down to D.C. There are pictures all over social media of him posing with various Republican leaders. How unusual is that for the Democratic mayor of New York City to sort of attend the inauguration of an opposing president who, people have raised a lot of issues about what President Trump's policies mean for New York City when it comes to everything from immigration to DEI policies?
hmm Yeah, it's the mayor of large American cities, including New York, do not have any specific role in the inauguration. It's somewhat unusual. He's not the first to attend one of these, but it's somewhat unusual. I mean, by comparison, in 2017, the then mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, was actually leading protests of Trump's first inauguration. So it just gives you a measure of how different Eric Adams' approach is. And I think he did some things in addition to just attending the swearing in that really kind of added some oomph to the message this was sending, for good or ill. He socialized with a lot of the, not just kind of New York Republicans who he organized lunches with, but also with, there's a photo I think of him out today with Roger Stone, the longtime Republican provocateur and dark arts agent who's very close to Donald Trump and is like kind of villain number two for Democrats. So this just all feels like a risky business and quite unusual. And frankly, it's been going on now for so many weeks or months that it's pretty hard to escape the conclusion that the mayor is not just searching for a pardon here.
Yeah. So, do you give any weight to the mayor's argument that he's the mayor of the most important city in the country and maybe on the planet, and that it behooves him to have some sort of relationship with this incoming administration, though they be Republican?
I think that that's a very fair argument, and I think it's true. I think leaders all over the country are trying to do just that. Democratic and Republican leaders alike tried to do that with Trump during his first term. But I don't think that explains most of what's going on here. I think two things can be true at once. It's one thing to meet with the president, and it's another to go out partying with Roger Stone.
Right. Mayor Adams is scheduled to stand trial in April. And of course, the idea that President Trump could pardon him has been bandied about. Give us any idea how that would look. I mean, this is pretty unprecedented territory we're in right now.
It is, but basically, from what they've said in public and what we've reported out in private, that the president has taken a liking to the mayor and sees him as something of a fellow victim of what they call a politicized Justice Department under President Biden. They have a further kind of shared identity in that, Adams basically says the reason that he was indicted is because he was being punished for criticizing the Biden administration's immigration policies, which, of course, criticizing those policies was the basis of Trump's successful reelection campaign. So there's a lot of common ground there, but the president of the United States has a lot of different competing priorities, and I think while this may be the biggest thing in Eric Adams' world right now, it's certainly not the biggest in Donald Trump. He's a famously unpredictable figure, so he could issue a pardon tomorrow or never. There's also been some speculation that maybe he'd let the case go to trial, and if Adams were convicted, he could commute a sentence afterwards. There's some suggestion maybe the Justice Department, soon to be under the control of his appointees, might drop the case, although that's a little bit more difficult because they would have to go to a judge to try and make the case that, they no longer want to bring this to trial. That can be hard to explain. So there's a whole range of options in front of him. The mayor's team are hoping for a very quick pardon so that they don't have to go to trial and they can turn and focus on his reelection campaign. We'll see if that comes to pass.
Nick, thanks for joining us and for your insightful reporting.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Coming up next, a curious but possibly unbridgeable divide that threatens to fracture Trump's base. We are now joined by author and contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, James Pogue. He has been looking at the complex alliance between Silicon Valley's tech moguls and the MAGA movement. During President Trump's inauguration on Monday, social media was abuzz with photos of tech leaders Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg taking center stage, showcasing the powerful but perhaps fragile coalition between big tech and the new administration. Is this marriage of convenience between Silicon Valley's globalist ambitions and MAGA's nationalist agenda headed for heartbreak? Thanks, James, for taking the time to connect with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you wrote this very interesting column where you talked about the sort of power dynamics between what you called sort of the MAGA traditionalists and the sort of tech right. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what's happening between those two camps right now.
Well, I think the way that I came to understand this, and that I actually it unlocked something for me when I began to think of things this way, is that the tech right has sort of replaced the traditional role of the Republican establishment. And so over time, this Trump movement, which is now, a decade old, has really kind of struggled to replace an elite that really doesn't have a worldview that they share. And in 2016, they struggled very badly with that. In 2020, throughout their period in the wilderness, they thought very carefully about how to not just, to paraphrase Conor McGregor, not to just take part, but to take over. And the money and candidly the staffing, the talent that Silicon Valley has been able to bring to them has really kind of kicked the movement's ability to think through its ambitions and its world historical role into a new gear.
I'm wondering that, there's been a lot of talk from the MAGA traditionalists about replacing what they call the liberal elite. I'm wondering if what we're seeing with the tech right, is that just a new sort of liberal elite in the mind of the sort of MAGA traditionalists?
Well, it depends on which MAGA traditionalist you might be talking to. I think some people genuinely do see it that way. And I think some people genuinely are very, very skeptical on an almost personal level, a level that brings, personal animus to these divisions. There are people in the movement who probably bring that kind of level of discord, you might say. For the vast majority, I would say that it's a much more nuanced thing. I think people in the MAGA sphere feel candidly with some accuracy that there's been this vast, what they call preference cascade of people suddenly opening up and waking up and sort of sharing worldviews that previously 2 years ago were unacceptable in the halls of power, in the halls of corporate power, even for sort of mainstream DC. You are seeing behind the scenes, in quiet conversations here, a lot of people sort of shift into a tacitly approving MAGA kind of mode. I think they see that a lot of tech people are doing that as well, and so they trust it because they feel their oats, candidly.
And so looming large over all of this is, of course, Elon Musk. He spent $250 million on this election. Where does he fall in those two camps? And has he had to sort of navigate opinions from both sides?
Yeah, so Musk is really fascinating, right? Because there's we can discuss his famous gesture. We can discuss a sort of, more concretely, his support for the AfD in Germany, these kind of like highly nationalist parties, his wading into British politics on the side of very nationalist populist people. But then sort of also his role in defending the H-1B visas, which are bringing in, foreign tech workers that his companies profit from. And the thing about Musk is that he put a lot of personal money and energy into getting Donald Trump elected. People really appreciate that. As far as what his worldview is, and as far as candidly his own personal behavior, there's a lot more skepticism because I don't know how to put this politely. The man acts a little bit like a wingnut, right? And you see it, and it's part of his brand, it's part of what he does. But for a governing coalition of a world-straddling empire, like this does become a bit of a problem. And I think there is a certain amount of skepticism just based on the role he plays and the kind of goofball affect he has about his role in this coalition. And then more seriously, you can talk, and I did talk to Steve Bannon, you can talk to people like this who have a really, really kind of skeptical vision of the millenarian tech-driven future that someone like Elon Musk would promise, right? So, Bannon doesn't want AI, in drone future and going to Mars and Stargate and all this. Bannon is a traditionalist. Bannon actually, and he's not just a traditionalist in the sense of he likes traditions. He's a capital T traditionalist coming from a right-wing school of thought with that name. And so someone like Musk is not just a kind of coalitional opponent. He's someone who almost has like a diametrically opposed worldview.
Is someone you mentioned Curtis Yarvin and some of his writings. I'm wondering, is someone like Musk influenced by Yarvin? And, what actually is Yarvin saying at this moment about how he sees the future of American governance?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yarvin has this idea called RAGE, Retire All Government Employees, which is, sort of famous in these circles as a approach to statecraft that would be a reset button. Curtis talks about a constitutional regime change, which is a phrase that you'll also hear used by Patrick Deneen, who's sort of the more normie version of Curtis Yarvin in certain ways. And Yarvin, it's very easy to see, for example, Yarvinite influence in the Doge idea, right? So Doge can sort of be seen as like a softer version of what rage would be. And so this is all very abstract to people coming very new to these names and these people. And all of a sudden you're seeing Curtis Yarvin, doing long interviews in the New York Times. And this has been very shocking on the one hand to people participating in the movement because they're like, whoa, how is Yarvin now acceptable and mainstream? And also to people who've never heard of any of this going, what happened to my country? And so I think what you really truly are seeing is something like a softer version of ideas that have been promulgated by thinkers like Yarvin for a long time. You are not seeing Curtis Yarvin, Dark Lord, directing the administration's plans. That is not probably happening. But you're seeing a certain alignment between the two.
I'm wondering, you mentioned the H-1B visa issue that came up over the sort of holidays. There was a big outbreak, argument among some of the MAGA traditionalists and, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about that issue? You talk about nationalism. A lot of what the traditional MAGA base is describing, seems really a lot like white nationalism, to be honest. I'm wondering, how did that H-1B visa debate play itself out? Has it been resolved as of yet?
Well, it hasn't been resolved in the sense that we still kind of don't know where Donald Trump is going to finally come down in some of these coalitional squabbles. And so, day by day, you can almost like see him taking the air a little bit. And there's a lot of speculation. I don't know if this is true at all. There's a lot of speculation that the real reason Ramaswamy was out of helping Musk to run Doge is in fact because of these coalitional squabbles where he took the wrong side against a faction of MAGA that, yes, I think you are right, it's not like couched white nationalism per se. It is, people are saying very clearly, we are a heritage American project determined to make this a homeland for heritage Americans. Like, this isn't even something that people are disputing at this point. And so, there's a faction of this movement, a very large one, that is zero immigration at all. Like, America has too many foreign-born people right now, and we're going to hit pause, and that means illegal, legal, nothing. We're stopping. There's times and places in American history where you've had movements that sort of danced up to these lines and things like that. This one, I would say, is very explicit and clear about what their intentions are for that. And then you saw on the other side these sort of, largely like wealthy tech people who were benefiting from the H-1B visas and saying, hey, we really need to import these people. It doesn't matter where they're coming. We need tech workers to help us. And what was a little bit surprising to me is, sort of in most of American political history, you would think the moneyed side would win out, the moneyed interest would win out. And in fact, in this case, they really were cowed because Twitter has given, this public square largely to the right now. I mean, it's much more like a right-wing forum than it is like the liberal, largely liberal forum that it was in, say, 2018. And on this forum, I mean, people can just pile on. And Ramaswamy and Musk, they were cowed, they were chastened by what became was like the real base of this movement.
And, we've seen that already in some of President Trump's immediate, executive orders around immigration, what you just mentioned. J.D. Vance, the vice president, was sort of once seen as a liability, but now some people see him as a sort of bridge between these two movements. Why would he be someone that could bridge this gap that's happening right now?
Well, JD has a lot of friends on both sides. Temperamentally, he's much more coming from the populist side of things. He's much more, JD's conversion experience was very much sort of like turning against the banker class and viewing this as a sort of elite that has arrayed itself against the America of the heritage Americans from which he derives. But he did work for Peter Thiel. He's friends with Curtis. He's friends with Peter Thiel. He's friends with all of these people. And so, he not only is he a natural link in terms of like what kind of politics he represents, he's a natural link in the sense of he is deeply intertwined with all of these people himself on a personal level. And that's just not true for a lot of the other sort of like high ranking people in the Trump administration. JD is in and amongst these people on Twitter. He has been forever. That's where he came from. And so that will be, I think, just simply on a social level, an important role for him.
You talked to Steve Bannon for your piece. Steve has been very clear where he stands. He's called folks like Elon Musk techno-feudalists. I'm wondering how his, characterization of the tech right as, techno-feudalists, how does that affect the argument? Is that drawing the sort of traditional MAGA right further away from any sort of reconciliation with the tech?
Well, so on Sunday night, Bannon got up, in front of a room that included Curtis Yarvin and many people on the tech right. And he spoke to, quote, the tech bros, and he said, listen, all right, I guess I characterized it as it wasn't a reconciliation, but it was an outstretched hand. And he gave a speech challenging them, saying, look, this movement is us, but you are welcome. And we would like to have you, but you are going to have to play ball on some of this. Throughout that night was a sort of strange thing because I'm sort of like there observing, but then people are talking sort of about my reporting and like the fissures that it describes. And so, people were describing the fissures and really talking a lot about attempting to bridge them. There was a lot of talk of like, we need both wings of the coalition, that sort of thing, right? The funny thing about Bannon is techno-feudalism is a term, to some degree popularized by Yanis Varoufakis, the left-wing former finance minister under the Syriza government in Greece. And so Bannon he really represents something that is not at all aligned with the kind of hyper-capitalist world of these tech guys. And, I'm just guessing. I think on some level there will have to be some kind of reckoning there, just because, even a couple like VCs who I know texted me after reading Bannon's comments in my piece, and they said, I think Bannon is right. Like they were concerned about some of this stuff he's raising as well. And so, it's not completely off base. And these are like liberals. Liberal tech people who are kind of going, Steve Bannon had me going and thinking this is pretty interesting. So I think there will have to be a conversation, not just about tech's role in the administration, but tech's role in American life and how much of it we can take. And I think we are really seeing that stress test start to form.
Still early, but where does President Trump come in this? Is he going to have to choose a side? Is he going to have to step in and sort of make peace between these two sides if he wants this coalition to continue?
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's going to have to figure something out about Elon's role. It's just every single day there's something that Musk does that you think, anyone else, you'd be gone already. And so, this kind of sniping with Sam Altman, at some point too, I think you're going to have, I think Trump is going to have to figure out whether ideas like this Stargate that are, sort of these like billionaire-led vast transformations of like how America's supposed to work and how we're going to live and how technology is going to play a role in our lives. Trump likes a lot of this stuff, it turns out. It looks like. I mean, I think he likes the idea of going to Mars. I think he's into some of this, but he's also a genuinely pretty temperamentally conservative person, small c conservative. And I think there may come a point where he goes, okay, you guys are taking this too far.
James, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be watching your coverage of how this split resolves or plays out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's it for this edition of Close Up. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Jeff Mays, filling in for Sam Roberts. And don't forget to download the CUNY TV app where you can catch our weekly program on the go, anytime, anywhere.